every player wants to play.
Exactly.
You go to Saquon Barkley returning from a high ankle sprain in 3 weeks and not looking the same since doing it. It's because that's something you don't do. You look at Tua Tagovailoa and not the hip injury, but the ankle injury and the way he looked walking off of the field after the LSU game. I thought he played well, but still you can see that he was hampered. These things are difficult. I think what happens is if you can get out there and play, you do. Like that's what you want to do as players. And so if I'm Grant and I can be transparent, I told him, hey man, take some days off. At least take some days off of practice, stay off your ankle and see how it feels. And if you feel like you can't be effective, if you feel like you can't help the team, then you have to consider not playing. But if you take these days off and you feel good, you go play because that's what you're supposed to do. That's what now, if this was a situation where I felt like this injury not necessarily could hamper his projected draft status, but could actually hinder his career. Mm-hmm. If this injury could turn into something that made him less of a whole human going forward, I would tell him sit out immediately. But it's not one of those things. And so it's that hard thing of trying to tell a 21-year-old young man who wants to win games, wants to do everything he could possibly be to be a good player, to not play if you can. And I think it's just difficult. So, that's something that Jack Marucci, the head trainer at LSU, Coach Ed Ogeron, they're going to have to get with him and start to weigh it, right? Do we need the whole Grant Delpit to beat Georgia in Atlanta, or do we think we can beat them with the guy who can not move around the same, who we can't use the same? And is it worth not trying to see if that guy is there down the road, right? Not having that guy down the road to beat Arkansas. Mm-hmm. So I guess you just got to make that decision.
So, because, all right, as a fan or a media person, I sit there and I go, tell the kid to sit for 2 weeks. Sit Arkansas, sit A&M, be right as you can be for Georgia, and then you get 3 weeks before the semis.
No,
this
I
to
understand.
Me, taking all the emotion out of it, of everything you just said with Grant's way, in which I can totally respect as a competitor and a guy who wants to play and has a lot on the line. Like, that seems like what will be the most beneficial for LSU.
No, it does. And I think it may be the most beneficial for Grant as well. I think what happens is you don't have enough amnesia to forget what a guy is when he's healthy, and then you compare him to who plays if he doesn't, and you say to yourself, man, having him out there is important. And if he feels he can go and he wants to go, if our trainer's okay, it's hard to say it's okay for this guy to go and for me to pull back away from it and say, I don't want you to go now, right? Because here's what happens. Here's what you don't want to send the message to your team, to that player, to everybody in the world, is that we don't want to beat Arkansas. That if we have everybody we can possibly have, it's Arkansas, we don't care enough to say, hey, man, we got to get you out of there. We got to get you out there. The same thing when you look at Tua Tagovailoa and he rushes back for LSU, and then there's some rumors that he may not play against Mississippi State. But if he can go against Mississippi State, you have to. Now, conventional wisdom says we're going to beat Mississippi State either way, whether Mac is quarterbacking or Tua is quarterbacking. So let's hold him back against Mississippi State because we're better than they are. Mm-hmm. But when this player says he can go, and when this competitive coach looks at it, he looks at it and says, but man, I can't send a message that this week is any different than last week. I don't want to send a message to the world that, you know what, when we walk in to play against Arkansas, we don't have the same sense of urgency we have when we play against Alabama. Now, you think people are smart enough to dissect that, right? But then you get beat over the top 4 times by Arkansas, who couldn't beat the
Western
Muppets.
Kentucky.
Yeah, who can't beat the Muppet Babies over the top, right? That if you sent them down to Fraggle Rock, will lose a game. Right, that Kermit would be an All-American against if he played free safety, and you don't have Grant Delpit, and he's basically a quote-unquote healthy scratch, then you go, oh, see, you should have had him out there. He was able to play. And so there's so many things to dissect in going through it that sometimes you lean on the science, and if the science says he can play, he plays. You lean on the player, and if the player says he feels good, he plays. Because as competitors, that's what we're built to do, right? You can't sell me all these cliches on Get Up. Well, it's turnover Wednesday. We're just moving on. This game is important as Alabama, but he's nicked up against Ole Miss, which is actually a week out from Alabama, where he already returned to play, and you sit him.
Yeah.
Right? And so if you sit him, you say, I'm sitting you because in your current state, you can't help us win. That's the only reason you sit him. Who you are right now is not good enough to help us beat this team. Because if we believe that it is, we got to play this team like we play them all, because it's college football and people lose stupid games because you are children.